FPV is getting more expensive by the day, but it doesn't always have to be that way, especially if you're a new pilot trying to get into this hobby. And one company trying to help with that is EMAX with their new TinyHawk Lite. And for under $160, it's actually more affordable than some drones by itself. So let's just open this up and see if it's right for you. Okay, so here it is, the TinyHawk Lite RTF kit. And if you're unfamiliar with RTF kits, it's pretty much a well-tailored system of perfectly chosen parts to help you get in the air as quickly and safely as possible. Now this one here is by EMAX, and everything here is including the drone, the radio, and even the goggles, guys. All you have to do is just charge the battery and go fly. So let's open this up and see what's inside. And the first thing here is the drone. Pretty nice looking whoop here in this gray color. Next we have a bag here with some spare propellers. Pretty cool, you'll need this, so put that in a safe place. And then below we have all the other accessories, some antennas for your goggles, guys, and some extra battery connectors here for the actual battery and drone. Besides that, we have a bag here with some goodies. Looks like a USB-C to USB-A, a USB-C to micro USB, a battery charger, very important, some accessories here for your goggles, and some hardware here like a wrench. Pretty cool, a lot here for your money. Next we have the actual goggles itself. Pretty nice. Take a look at this a little bit later. It looks like the transporter too. And then we have the actual radio here. This is the E8 transmitter. And that's it, guys. Okay, so let's take a closer look at the drone here, the star of the show, the actual TinyHawk Lite here. Now, EMAX has made this whole kit here to be as affordable as possible, so we'll see how they've done that. Now, as you can see, this one here comes with a battery in here, and this thing here is fairly light, but I do want to weigh this drone, because most people are concerned about the weights of these drones overall. All right, let's see how much this weighs. All right, 36.0 grams, not bad, 36 grams. And then with the battery, we'll see the battery here, 17 grams, it's a pretty hefty battery here. So with the battery, it's around 53 grams, all right, guys? So not the lightest thing out there, but also not the heaviest either. For a beginner, that's not too bad. Now the first thing that jumps out at me, especially with the EMAX drone, is this frame here. Now typically EMAX has a white frame. They've gone with this nice, looks like a military or some kind of a gray color. It's pretty cool looking, guys, I must say. It is a departure from their white drones, but this one here is made of some kind of plastic. Looks like an injected molded plastic. And if you're a beginner pilot, you want that because this thing here is very, very durable. You can crash this numerous times. And it looks like all the components on this drone here is very well protected, including the camera on here. And obviously, guys, this is a small drone. There will be crashes, especially if this is your first drone. And we'll see how this thing here holds up at the end of this review. Now, besides the below here, we do have these motors on here. Now, this looks a little bit different than your typical FPV motor, and that is because this is a brush motor. Now, it's a little bit different. Most drones, you'll see a brushless motor. Now, this one here is a 0816 size, and we do have a HQ propeller on here, 40mm propellers on here. And EMAX said this thing gives you pretty good performance. We'll see about that. Now, I must say that I haven't really flown many brushed motor drones, so I'm kind of curious to see how the performance is on this, and I'll let you know if this flies very well. Now, connected to the motors is the flight controller and ESC. That's the device that actually maintains the flight characteristics of this drone. And this one features an F411 flight controller with a 10 amp ESCs. Usually the higher the number, the more current you can flow to the motors, and usually it's more durable the higher the number. Now 10 amp is pretty much a high number. Typically we'll see 5 amp in this kind of range here, so 10 amp should be more than adequate for a drone of this size. Now besides that, we do have a USB-C plug right here, or port, and I have to say it's very convenient. It's right on the top right here, and you can plug this to your computer to actually configure this drone in the future if you want to change some settings or put a different tune on here. Now this one here does feature the Betaflight software. Now EMAX said this is one of the few drones in the market with brush motors featuring a Betaflight firmware, and I do have to agree with that. Now typically you'll see brush motors on more inexpensive drones, so to see Betaflight on here, it's pretty cool overall. Now in the front here we have the FPV camera. This is obviously an FPV drone, a first-person view drone. This is the reason why we're getting this. And this one features the Runcam Nano 3. It's a pretty good camera. I've used it before in the past. and it has performed very well with realistic colors. Now, if you can see here on the side, this camera here is also adjustable. You have 2 screws on here, and you can adjust the tilt or the angle of the camera to actually adjust your speed. Typically, you want a lower angle to fly slower in the house, and a higher angle to fly faster, maybe outdoors. So it's pretty cool to see that we have a non-fixed angle on this drone. Now, connected to the camera, we do have a VTX. That's the device that transmits the image to your goggles. And this one here is power adjustable from 25 milliwatts all the way to 400 milliwatts. So that's a step in the right direction. Now, because of the higher power output of this VTX, it is locked or comes from the factory limited to around 25 milliwatts, and that's because of different regions of the world. If you want to extract more power out of this, you have to unlock it. And it's as easy as just pressing this VTX button while powering on the drone. Now, talking about the VTX power output, we do have the VTX antenna right here. This looks like a pretty standard VTX antenna. I'm glad that it's pretty long and raises above the actual canopy of the drone here, so this is pretty cool. Sometimes you'll see some very short ones, and it does have a UFL connector with some glue on there, so this is going to prevent this antenna from popping off during a crash. And guys, you will be crashing this drone, especially if it's your first FPV drone overall. Now, talking about antennas, we have another one right here, this red little wire right here, and this is the actual antenna for your receiver, and this is what communicates to your actual radio or controller. This is an Express LRS receiver. It is SPI based, and we'll talk a little bit about that later in the future, maybe once you get more advanced. But the gist is that if you want to update the firmware on this, you will have to update the Betaflight firmware as well. Now, finally, underneath, we have the battery holder here. It's 2 rubber bands, pretty standard for any TinyHawk drone. And then the connector right here, this one features the EM 2.0 connector. This is EMAX's latest connector, and it does deliver really good performance and reducing battery sag during higher power outputs. We have the battery right here. This one comes with a 750 milliamp hour 1S battery. Now, this is pretty interesting because typically smaller 1S drones will have a smaller battery. This one here does have a pretty large battery, so I'm kind of curious to see the flight times on this. Let's move on to the goggles here. Now, this is the Transporter 2 goggles. I've also used this before in other EMAX products, and it's a pretty nice goggles overall. Now, as you can see here, this is a nice gray, modern looking kind of goggles. You do have your strap here for your head. It's a 3-point strap, pretty comfortable. And the cool thing about this one here, it can actually telescope based on your vision here. And you can change the focus based upon the distance. Now, this one here is not compatible with glasses. As you can see, if I put my face right here, it's not compatible. Hence the reason why you have this telescoping feature right here. And for me, I've had a really good luck with using this in the furthest setting right here, or the 3rd notch on the goggles. Now, on top here, you have your 2 antenna ports here with the antennas right here. We'll set this up a little bit later. Now, on the side here, you have your band and channel buttons here to change the frequency on this goggles, as well as a micro USB-C port to charge the battery in here. So everything is integrated in this goggles. And the other side, you have a auto search button as well as a menu and power button right here. Now, one thing that's missing from this goggles here, as I would see right here, is a micro SD card slot. Now, we do have 2 versions of the Transporter 2, and this is the one without the DVR. Now, DVR is pretty much a device to record your flight footage. If you're just gonna learn how to fly, this is not really a deal breaker, but it's one way to actually save cost to make this more affordable to you. Now, on the bottom here, you have a 1/4 screw to attach this to your radio. You say, how am I going to attach this to my radio? Well, I talked about earlier, if you wear glasses, it's not compatible with glasses. But in the event that you really still can't see the screen because it's still kind of blurry, then the best thing about this goggles here is that it detaches from the actual housing, and this turns into a monitor. It really is, and it was a game changer when it came out, and it's still pretty impressive overall. Especially if you're gonna upgrade to future drones, then this can be used as a monitor. You can hand this to your friends or spectators, and they can see what you're doing while you're flying. It's a real cool feature, guys, overall. All right, let's move on over to the radio. This is the E8 transmitter. Also a product I've used before in the past with other EMAX drones. And this is a pretty nice radio overall. Same as the goggles, it has a modern design, same color scheme on here. You have your gimbals right here, and we'll talk a little bit about this when we go for our first flight, but it's very, very smooth, no stiffness in here. You have your hook here for your lanyard. Now, this is a very light radio, but sometimes you'll see guys wear a lanyard and you can hook this to it. Besides that, we have the power button right here, and then we have our trim for each gimbal right here. Now, typically, we don't use trim switches or buttons in FPV, but it is here for in case your drone is drifting left or right. Besides that, we have a lot of switches on top here. Now, the cool thing about this radio here, and I'm sure EMAX kind of heard a lot of guys' concerns, is that a lot of first-time pilots will get confused with all these switches on here, but we do have labels for each switch. This one says arm and disarm. This one says beginner mode, intermediate, and expert mode. And then you have your flip over and your beeper alarm. So these things are very well labeled. So in case you want to use one of these functions, you just look at it and you can use those features. Now in the back here, you have your battery compartment. There's a battery in here already. It's a 1S18650. And then you have your charging port here to charge said battery. And that's it, guys. This thing here is ready for its first flight, and that's exactly what we're gonna do right here. Now, before you use any of these equipment, make sure you fully charge all your equipment, including the goggles, the battery for your drone, and for your radio here. So I'm gonna go charge these batteries, and then we'll set this up to take it for its first flight. Okay, so we're back. We have all our batteries charged. This battery in the drone is charged. The battery in the radio is charged. And this one here in the actual goggles is almost finished. As you can see, the red light right here is on, so it should be fully charged here very soon. Now, the first thing we'll do here is actually set up the actual goggles. Now, you never want to power these on or operate a radio or goggles or transmitter without the antenna on here. You could do some damage to the drone or the actual receiver. Now, technically, yes, this is a receiver, so it shouldn't transmit any information, but it's good practice to actually have these things connected. So we'll just remove these rubber covers on here. We have our supplied antennas in this package. Really nice. And if you want to, you can remove the protective screen. Since you guys want to see this in its glory, we'll take it off. That's nice and beautiful. And then you can just put the power on, hold this for a few seconds. And as you can see, it says EMAX on here. And static. There really isn't anything connected to it, so that's why it's showing static. So we'll just put it off. For some crazy reason, if you can't see through the goggles, we do have these accessories on here to mount this to the radio. And it's easy as just removing this little tab right here, open this up, and then you can insert this right in here. And it should click like that. And I'll just screw it in for this test purpose. You line this up, the holes, like a regular GoPro, fish this through, and you can easily just tighten this as much as you want. All right, and you can adjust it, and here we are. Here's your radio and your goggles or your monitor. So it's really a cool feature on this kit right here. Now, before we go for our first flight, if this is your first flight, first time flying a drone, you want to get familiar with all these switches and knobs on here. Now, the most important switch on this entire radio is this one right here, this disarm and arm switch. This is what provides power to the motors on your drone, and this is what starts and stops the motors on this drone. So if you have a crash or this thing goes out of whack, if you don't disarm it or put it off, this thing's gonna stay running forever. So you always wanna know where this switch is and be very familiar with it. Now, to get the motors to start initially, this left gimbal has to be fully down before you can arm or turn on the motors. If this thing is not fully down right here or halfway and you try to arm it, it's not gonna go on. So just remember that overall. Besides that, we have 3 mode switches right here, expert, intermediate, and beginner. And we'll start off in beginner mode, obviously, and that correlates to angle mode. And then the second one, intermediate, correlates to horizon. And then expert mode is fully manual, where there's no protection, it won't self-level. Besides that, we have the flip over mode. In case your drone is away from you and it's upside down, you can hit the flip over and then rotate one of your gimbals and it should flip the drone back right side up. Now, besides, we also have the beeper alarm in case this thing gets crashed into the woods or the weeds and you can't really find it with your eyes. You can put the beeper on and it will beep so you can easily find this drone. And I think that's it, guys. As far as the gimbal, this is obviously your throttle up and down. This makes the drone yaw left to right in the vertical plane, so the drone will actually pivot in this axis right here. And then you have the bank, which makes this drone bank left or right. And then you have your pitch right here to make the drone actually pitch forward or pitch back. So I think everything in here is good. Let's just power this on. Now, obviously guys, before every flight, you want to give this thing a thorough look over, or a pre-flight. Make sure your VTX antenna is on. Guys, if you are gonna power this drone up, make sure you're ready to fly within a few seconds, say 30 seconds. If you're just gonna power this up and leave this here on the counter or on your table, it could overheat. The VTX is emitting a signal, and this thing will get hot really fast. You don't want your drone to overheat. So if you're not ready to fly, don't power this up. Now, we're gonna do it in this order. I'm gonna power on my goggles first, then power on my radio, and then last but not least, I'll power on the drone. I could bring the fan here for this demonstration. All right, the time is here. Let's plug this up and see how the image looks. Wow, that was fast. Holy crap, there's the image. Beta flight. That's pretty impressive. So it's already on the correct channel on here. You can see right here, they have the OSD already laid out. You know, EMAX did the best to put these statistics in the right spot right there. All right, so I want to take this for its first flight, and I want you guys to see this as well. But because this doesn't have a DVR, there's no way for you guys to see this. So I have to use my other goggles to record. This thing here is connected. Let's see if I can arm it. It arms. It works. I'll be using my DJI goggles for this flight. All right, guys, so now that we're recording here, what do you think about the image? The image should be pretty cool. The time is here. I'll leave the screen here so you guys can see it. All right, we're gonna start in beginner mode, guys. Image looks okay. Arm. I have the fan on, unfortunately. Let's do it. It's docile. It is docile. This thing can fly right in front of me. There it goes. Let's go downstairs. The rates are very low. This thing is really good for a trainer, for a first pilot. 25 milliwatts, you can see image is still holding up. All right, I have some FPV hoops or gates in here. Here's another one, a lot lower. Let's see if we can do it. All right, now the camera is good, guys. You can do some prop wash here and there. Let's see if we can get this mega again. There you go. Oops, that was on the crash. All right, the voltage looks good. Now guys, you want to land this drone before 3.5 volts. Anything below 3.5, you could be doing some damage to the battery. Let's bring it back upstairs. Not bad, not bad. The rates are super low on this drone. Camera's not too bad. Exposed is okay. Let's see if we can shoot some gaps. Oh, some interference there. I can feel the drone losing power here. My throttle is a lot higher. So I'm getting to around 3.5 volts, guys. That's the fan making it wobble a bit. All right, my voltage is getting down to 3.50, so we'll have to land it pretty soon. All right, 3.5, let's land this puppy. All right, I gotta remember my arm switch. There it is. Min battery 3.47. That's the lowest I got it. And we got 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Not bad for a first flight, guys. Not bad. This thing flew pretty good. The angle was pretty good as well. The image was good. And I think it did pretty well. Hopefully you guys saw it here. I think EMAX did a really good job setting the rates on this thing. This thing is so it's smooth, but it requires a lot of input because first-time pilots will be moving these sticks pretty aggressively. So it's very, very docile. It requires a lot of stick input, so the rates are very, very low. All right, first impressions, I think the TinyHawk Lite did a really good job. I didn't see any crazy difference here indoors as far as performance with the brush motors. But the honest truth is you're not gonna fly your drone always indoors. Sometimes you're gonna go outside, fly it in your backyard, fly it in the park. So that's what we're gonna do and see if these brush motors can hold up here. And I think they'll do it, but we'll see, who knows. So I'll go outside flies for a few more packs, see how it goes and let you know my impressions of the TinyHawk Lite. Okay, so we're back from our outdoor test and the TinyHawk Lite did a pretty good job. Now, as you saw indoors, the flight characteristics of this drone is pretty good. I think is pretty much perfect for a beginner pilot or someone trying to get into the FPV world. The rates on this, especially in the beginner mode, it's super, super low, guys. It requires a lot of input just to get the drone to move, turn, or climb, which is what you want for a beginner pilot, someone who's flying this for the first time. If you have a traditional or normal drone, this thing would be in the wall immediately, guys. Something I had to struggle with my first drone. Now, we did go outside and we did put this thing in acro mode and it felt significantly better. The rates were a lot higher and this thing was a little bit more maneuverable. But still, as a pilot who's been flying for a few years, the rates are a little bit dampened on this drone. Now, that's not a bad thing per se because you can easily go into Betaflight, plug this into your computer, and then change the rates on this drone so you can make it a little bit more snappy. Now, today the winds were between 3 and 5 miles an hour, almost calm. The wind started to pick up at the end of my flight test, but this thing flew very well in light to calm winds. Now, if the winds are above 5 to around 10 miles an hour, this thing is gonna get moved about a little bit more. You might have some difficulty trying to get back to you or trying to maneuver the drone in a more efficient manner. Now, that leads me to the actual speed and the characteristics of these motors. Now, this is the first time I'm flying an FPV drone with brush motors, and I could feel the difference immediately compared to brushless motors. Now, that's not a bad thing per se, especially for a first-time pilot, but it does require a lot more input to get the desired thrust that you want. Typically in FPV drones, once you touch this thing moves immediately and the drone just moves immediately, but it does require a lot more input to get the thrust level that you want. At the same time, maybe these motors are a little bit small, but guys, sometimes I had to use full throttle in, say, a dive or recovery. If the wind were to move me around, it would require some full throttle on here. Now, this same phenomenon is also exacerbated when the battery has reduced. So say you're coming to the end life of the battery, say around 3.6 to 3.5 volts. you do require a lot more throttle just to keep the drone in the air. Now that is also noticeable on brushless motors, but they tend to have the same, or what we strive to get is the same performance whether the battery is at full charge or even at 3.5 volts. Now, I don't think it's the battery. I do think it's a condition of these brush motors. I have to say though, it's pretty cool. It's like a warning that you're losing your battery life, but it's a little bit different feeling compared to what we're used to in traditional drones. Now, talking about accurate maneuvers, these motors here, this drone here, I don't think it was designed for accurate maneuvers. Yes, you can do the occasional roll, maybe a loop. I wouldn't say a power loop, but you can do a loop, just do a flip. A flip would be a better word for it. It can do that, but if you do any kind of power loop where you're accelerating and then easily, gradually increasing on the throttle, you're probably not gonna make it. You're probably gonna run out of thrust and you're probably gonna hit the ground. Maybe if you do go into beta flight and then tweak the rates, you might have some better luck with that. Now, EMAX also says that you can actually swap these motors out. They're saying you can go on any kind of like box store, like say Amazon or online, and find replacement brush motors and get even more thrust with this. So that's a possibility. These motors are plugged into the flight control, so you can just easily remove them and then replace a motor. Okay, so let's move on to the camera of this drone here. And this thing did a pretty good job. It did work as expected. I do have to commend EMAX for putting this VTX on here. It did a really good job. Let's start off with the image quality. This is the Runcam Nano 3, and just as I said before, I've had good luck with this camera in the past. This one did give me accurate colors. It really did a pretty good job for an analog camera. The exposure value was pretty good. It would change as I went from dark to bright environments. So really no gripes about it. I do think that it's mounted very well in the canopy here, not much jello or vibration in here. Now, one thing I tried to do in the field was try to adjust this camera angle here, but these bolts are tightened down a little bit too tight. I guess that's good, but make sure you have your screwdriver to actually adjust this so you can change the tilt on it. Now, the VTX did a pretty good job. As you saw before, we started off here indoors with 25 milliwatts and we had no breakup, no issues at all. Now, we did go outdoors, put it to around 200 milliwatts, and same thing again, no issues altogether. Now, surprisingly, I did fly this thing pretty far to the end of my park and still no breakup. Only when I turned around and went back down and on the way back towards me when the antenna is away from me, then I got a little bit of breakup. But 200 milliwatts did a pretty good job. Now, don't forget, this is a 400 milliwatt VTX, so you could increase the power even further. Now let's move on to the flight times of the TinyHawk Lite. Now, this one here indoors, I did get over 4 minutes of flight time. Now going outdoors with more wind, more throttle in acro mode or expert mode, I call it, then you're gonna have reduced battery life. I was averaging around 4 minutes of flight time with the 750 milliamp hour battery. Now that's pretty good, even for a beginner drone. Most beginner drones will get around 3.5 to 3 minutes of flight time. So to have 4 minutes of flight time is pretty impressive. These are brand spanking new battery. Obviously, the more that you use it, this thing here is gonna deteriorate and you're gonna have shorter battery life. Now, I also flew this with other batteries as well. I think this is the last one I flew. This is like a 650 or 450. Let's see here. This is a 650. I also flew it with a 450 milliamp and the 650 right here. The 650 is very similar to the 750. And with the 450, I got less. I got around 3 minutes of flight time. Now, I have to say though, I was flying the 450 in a more aggressive manner. The battery is a bit lighter, so I did have a little bit more power to weight ratio in there, so the drone was a little bit snappy. If you do want to take advantage of that weight savings, you get the lighter battery. This is gonna be a little bit more nimble. You'll get a little bit more performance out of it because it's lighter overall. Now, if you're a new pilot trying to get into FPV, I probably would recommend the 750 only because it does give you the longest flight time. You're not gonna be doing too much aggressive maneuvers, no accurate maneuvers. And as a first-time pilot, you wanna have the most flight time as possible. Now, this does come with one battery. I highly recommend you get at least 3 additional batteries because if you think about it, one pack lasts 4 minutes. You then have to go charge it again. It might take you 20-30 minutes to charge that battery and then fly again. It could get pretty frustrating overall. As far as the RF link in the TinyHawk Lite, I didn't have any issues both with the drone and with the receiver. Now, in my OSD or on-screen display, there wasn't really any telemetry for the RX Link. You can easily add that to your screen if you want to using the Betaflight software in the OSD tab. Express LRS performs very, very well. And I did fly this thing pretty far. I never wanted to have a fail-safe with this drone. So I do think that these two are paired up very, very well. Last but not least, let's talk about the durability of the drone. Now, I did crash this thing a few times, as you saw, both indoors and outdoors. Although my outdoor crashes were on like kind of a soft surface like mulch and stuff like that, there really isn't any damage to this. I don't suspect this thing to crack at all. This thing is very forgiving and everything is protected very, very well, guys. Now, having said that, I did have a few crashes where the drone was upside down, and I did try the crash flip mode. And as you saw indoors, it didn't respond. I tried it afterwards and it did work. Now outside, I did have it work once in a while. I did try to crash flip and it still wouldn't want to roll over. But the crash flip mode was hit and miss. It just wasn't very consistent. Now, last thing I want to talk about here is upgradability of this whole RTF. So there's a good chance after a few weeks or months, you're going to outgrow this drone here. And can I use my existing equipment here on future drones? Well, the answer is yes. If you do buy an analog drone with Express LRS receiver, then these two equipment will work. This is an Express LRS transmitter, and this should work with any Express LRS receiver, as well as this goggle here is an analog receiver. So as long as you have an analog drone, then this goggle here should work. So the upgradability or the upgrade path on this is very good. I still do wish that there was a DVR in the goggles. Now, EMAX does offer that if you want to upgrade to that. It is a little bit more expensive. But overall, what do I think about this whole kit here, the TinyHawk Lite RTF? I do think that EMAX is very successful with this kit right here. And the whole goal was to make a kit that's very inexpensive. So you can get into the hobby, learn how to fly FPV, and then transition over to a more modern, more performance-based drone overall. And don't forget, guys, these radios here, the E8 transmitter, can be used as a controller for your sim. So I would highly recommend you get a sim for your computer and put that time in the computer opposed to crashing your drone overall. So let me know what you think about this TinyHawk Lite. Now, if you're a pilot already in the FPV space and you're over RTF kits and want something faster, well, EMAX has you covered here with the Hawk Apex. This is a 5-inch racing drone. This thing was built and engineered specifically for speed. I've done a full review on this one, and I'll leave a link above so you can take a look at it. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.